So now we have a 2014 Honda Accord, and the complaint is the backup camera on the dash doesn't work. Let's have a look inside. So you'll notice when I put it in reverse, it shows the intended direction, and if I turn the wheel, that changes, but there is no camera view. Apparently this has been looked at a couple of times at the dealership, which it gets it back, it appears to be working again, but then it stops shortly after. So I guess the first thing we're going to do is set up a scan tool and see if there's any fault codes that will guide us in any direction at all, and we'll check for TSBs. So this is a new vehicle record. I've never scanned this before. Snap-on scanner automatically ID'd it already. And we'll start out with a network scan of the vehicle and see if there's any codes that will point us in a direction of some sort with regards to this backup camera. I'm not sure how long this network scan is going to take. There's the progress bar. That's fairly quick. Probably about 60 seconds. I'll pick up when we're at the end. So, it took about a minute and a half, almost 2 minutes to scan 21 controllers. And for the most part we don't have any codes except for these codes in the door lock system in the body, and I don't think they have anything to do with this backup camera. I'm not sure what those codes are generated by. It's interesting, they're in the body and they're in the HVAC. Probably all the same control codes. Yeah. I'm going to try clearing all these codes out and see if that restores the operation again. Looks like this is divided up in several body controllers, but it's all the same controller. So I've got an electronic record of this already, so I'm going to just go in and clear all codes read by code scan and just see if that returns the operation of the backup camera. I would highly doubt it, but you never know. This seems fairly slow. Well, I'll pick up when we get to the end of this. So that took a couple minutes to actually go through a network code clear. And we're going to go and see if this has restored the operation of the camera. I just want to go into the door lock system and see if the codes had come back at all. All body electrical codes. Let's try that. So they haven't come back. So let's go and see if there's any change to the operation of the backup camera. I wonder where you hit OK. Oh, I guess you don't have to. Well, that didn't make any difference. I wonder why it says change view. Check your surroundings. Okay, so that didn't seem to make any difference. So those codes are secondary. We'll see if there's any TSBs on this. So it appears when the camera is up, there's a you can use this menu button here to change the view. You can brighten it by turning this up and down, and you can change different camera views. That's be nice once it works. So again, we're going to check for TSBs and see if there's anything. So I'm on Identifix and I'm looking for technical service bulletins and case histories, and other than a lane watch camera and forward FCW, I'm not sure what camera that is, lane departure warning camera, that's not what we're working on. We're working on the rear view camera. No TSBs. specifically related to this. Special tools for camera, vehicles with nav, audio turns off. I did find a picture of the camera and the connector view. Let's have a look at where this camera is on this vehicle. So here's the camera located just above the license plate, and I could just notice the license plate sticker has expired. They probably didn't realize that. One thing that makes me worried here is the fact that because it's on the trunk lid, every time you open and close the trunk, this wiring harness here has to bend. And if I look carefully here, it looks like somebody's been in here and taped up this wiring harness. So I wonder if there's some compromised wires. Any harness that flexes every time you open and close a door or trunk or hatch or something is always highly suspicious. So we'll look at that area and see if there's anything wrong in there. So, no joy. I opened the harness. There is a tremendous amount of wires in here, but I found no broken wires where the harness had been taped up. I suspect that the dealership techs were thinking the same thing I was, being as how this is intermittent. There is one cable in here that I think is the audio cable here. It's quite large. I'm going to turn the key on, put this thing in reverse, and wiggle the wires back here and see if I notice anything happening on the dash. So I've got the key on, engine not running obviously. Gear shift in reverse. I'm going to go move the wiring back there and see if that camera comes on. Well, that seemed to make no difference. I tried tapping on the camera and that didn't work. So we're going to find that connector at the camera and test some wiring into the camera itself. So here's the connector behind the hush panel on the inside of the trunk lid that goes to the camera, and the camera is right up in here. Everything looks clean and tight there. I wiggled those connections. That's a picture of the connector and the pinouts. There's 8 wires to that, what appears to be that camera. Why so many wires, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. So we'll do some tests on this connector. So I performed all these electrical measurements here, and the only one that reads wrong from what I can see is pin 8, which is red, interestingly, is supposed to be ground for the rear view camera. And it says if that's open, the navigation screen goes black and the guidelines still display, which is what I have. Now when I measure the voltage on that red wire, which is this one up in here, I got system voltage. Let me try it again. Just going to set this down for a second. Well, I don't actually have system voltage. I have about 8 volts on that, 7.8 volts on that red wire, which according to this is supposed to be 0. Oh, do I take a chance and just ground it and see if that fixes the problem? Because that appears to be an open in the ground. It's funny that they use a red wire for a ground, and the black wire up here is power source for the rear view camera. Ignition switch 1, accessory vehicle and run. Let's check that one too. So here's a Mitchell version of this rear view camera, showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wires to it. The red wire, which is this one, on the Honda information says it's a ground, but yet it goes, all the 8 of these wires go to the nav radio unit. None of them are identified on the schematic as to what they actually do. I'm afraid to just apply a ground on this wire because that could damage the nav unit if it isn't already defective. The other odd thing is the black wire, this one here, shows it going back to the nav unit as well. in the Honda information it says it's ignition accessory or power for the unit. I've only got 9 volts there, or 8 volts there, 7.9 volts, which is odd. And it doesn't, I'm going to see if I can find an OEM diagram. There, so how's that for a schematic? Let's try blowing it up and see if that helps. Not helping. Oh, there we go. Wow. So I think the camera is way over at this end of the diagram. Rear view camera. So this is the nav unit, and it shows all 8 wires going to the nav unit. None of them are labeled on this schematic. Let's check a pinout of the nav unit and see if we can correlate with the terminology. Yeah, this black wire is not labeled here. The odd thing is I have like 7.9 volts on several of these wires, yet it does say on that testing pinout that I should have 7 volts depending on what mode it was in. Confusing. So at this connector, this particular red wire and green wire do not show up down here. Remember this larger cable, which I figured might be a video cable? Well, it turns out that looks like 6 of the wires run inside that cable. So if it's broken internally, which it very well could be in here, that could cause the issue. I got no way of qualifying whether there's a break inside this wire. It doesn't feel suspicious, but man, according to the schematic, this red wire is supposed to be ground and I have 7.9 volts on it. This black wire is supposed to be ignition and I have 7.9 volts on it. So it's kind of acting like a bunch of wires are shorted together or open. Well, I guess the only way to qualify these wires is to remove the nav radio and check the circuits from the nav radio back here for continuity. The only wire that tests bad is this one here. It says it should be 0 volts, and it says if it is open, the nav will go black, but the grid line or the guidelines will still display, which is exactly the symptom we have. I have 7.9 volts or 7.8 volts on that wire right now. I tried grounding it. It made no difference in the display operation. The black wire, it says ignition switch accessory, but it also says 8 volts and I have 7.9 volts on it, so I'm saying that that's okay. The other ones are mode switches, because this camera has 3 modes of operation. It's like wide angle, normal, and I don't know, 3 views. The shield is 0, and the camera control signal for rear view camera is 0. Let's check that one, that blue wire, light blue wire. Okay, I just noticed something here. I'm looking at this side of the harness and the wire is red on this corner, but on this side of the harness it's green. Thanks, Honda. The white wire is white, the yellow is blue. Why would you change frickin' colors? So we need to check. I'm not sure if these wire colors pertain to the actual pins on the connector or the pins on the harness. Oh my goodness sakes, why would you change colors going through a connector? So that is correct. This is terminal side of male terminals, which is this side here, which is what I'm checking it on. They change color going into the actual camera, but the pin locations, pin number 8 is red, the one right next to it is white, The one right next to that, number 6, is light blue and then gray. So these are the harness side. This is the harness side, not the camera side. So I'm still back to there's a problem with this wire. It's got 7.9 volts on it, so we need to check continuity from the camera or from the nav radio itself. So in the electrical diagram, it shows a connector between the rear camera, the backup camera, and the nav radio, and it's an inline connector C111, and this is the general location. It's below the hood release or parking brake release, in that general area behind the left kick pillar, kick panel in the A pillar. So let's have a look. I've got the pillar cover off and found that connector. So in this area here, you can see here's that molded harness coming from the trunk, and it goes into that connector right there. That's C111. So there's I think there's 4 or 5 wires in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by the looks of it. Yeah, red, white, black, green, and gray. Gray is the shield. We're going to check the voltages here and then test continuity of this wire from this connector to the connector at the backup camera. See how that works out. So I'm back pinning that red wire, which is supposed to be a ground, at this connector, and I've got 7.85 volts glare on here. The black wire has 8 volts, so I'm going to check continuity of these wires to the camera. So measuring resistance of the red wire from this connector C111 under the dash to the connector at the backup camera. Back pinning here, and I got a long jumper wire, shows 0.4 ohms. So we don't have a problem with those wires. I'm going to check the rest of them. So I tested all 8 of the wires coming to this C111 connector for continuity to the trunk, to the backup camera connector, and they're all good. I also tested for a short between wires at 400,000 ohms resistance, and they all show infinite, so they're not shorted. But this red wire, which is supposed to be the backup camera ground, is showing 7.9 volts on it when it's plugged into the connector. So that's back pinning the camera ground wire on the red terminal at C111, and it shows 4 volts. Let's put the camera on. Doesn't work now. The lane departure warning camera on the right side works fine. Put it reverse. It's funny, I don't get even the bars on the radio now unless I don't have the key in the on position. The other camera was working. Now I've only got 2 volts on that wire. Something strange going on. So there we go again with the camera displaying the lines, but a black screen. It shows 7.8 volts on that ground wire, or so-called ground wire. So I'm starting to lean towards a problem with the nav unit, but that seems awful unusual. The right side camera works fine when you put the signal light on, and it's the same type of circuit. I wonder if it runs through this connector. I doubt it does. I think it probably goes through the other side. So I found some information on there being a built-in diagnostic procedure for the display and radio and stuff. And you enter diagnostics by starting the vehicle, and when the display screen comes on, you press the volume power button, display button, and the back button simultaneously for 3 seconds, and it goes into diagnostics. So I'm going to give that a try. Okay, get ready. So as soon as the splash screen comes up, press and hold all three buttons simultaneously, and then we get into that menu, self-diagnostic. So I'm going to try and get the camera a little closer here. So now use the menu select button to select self-diagnostic mode, and press the menu select button to run the test. Then we get into another sub-menu. Now I can use the menu knob to rotate through the different functions, and I'm going to go to the rear camera. Come on, you can do it. Oh, there we go. Rear camera. Let's see what it says when we press yes. Camera connection is okay. Well, isn't that special? Press it again. Let's try the lane watch camera. Connection okay. Aiming okay. I'm not going to start. Press return. So it thinks the camera is fine. What it says in help. Come on. Oh, you got to go around the other way. Each icon can be pressed and a diagnosis test detailed run can be confirmed. Press the icons on the system link screen to use details for each icon. See shop manual for details. Well, that didn't help. Tried scanning it with another scan tool, and no fault codes in the radio display. Oh well, it was a nice thought. So I thought I'd unplug the rear camera. You notice that it's highlighted in yellow now. I got the rear camera disconnected. Let's see what it says about it. Connection NG. Might as well say NFG. Well, that's useful. Oh well. So I've confirmed the wiring from the rear view camera connector right here to C111 under the left side A pillar, and the wiring is good. There's no opens, there's no shorts between circuits. But notice there are 5 wires in this conduit, and it's a shielded cable. Now I look at the right side power mirror, and it has a camera in it as well, and it works when you put the right signal light on, provided you're not in reverse. That camera shows up on the display to indicate what's beside you in the right lane. Notice that the wiring is very similar, same color wires. So what I propose to do here is to try to backwards engineer this circuit a little bit by looking at connector 107, which is under the right side of the dash, because you see C107 and C111 have the same color wires. I'm going to see if I can find a connector view for C107. We're going to test at this wire here, which supposedly would be the ground, and see if it is in fact grounded on the right side mirror that functions. So this is the best diagram I can find for C107. It appears to be the upper connector on the right side A pillar. You can access it from under the dash, so we're going to have a look at that. So I managed to get the connector pulled out through the door, and this, I believe, although it looks like an orange wire here, is the wire that should be the ground according to this. I labeled these connector wires. There's yellow, red, 12 isn't used, and white is 13. So if you look here, you see yellow, red, and blue is not part of this circuit, and then white down there, followed by gray, and then green. So I think this wire here is the one that we need to check to see what's on that wire. So that's what we're going to set up to do. So I'm back pinning that wire, which I believe is the same circuit as the backup camera, and believe it or not, I read 7.85 volts on that wire. Yet on this black wire, which is supposed to be, according to the schematic back there, is supposed to be a ground, or is supposed to be power, is actually 0 on this side. So I wonder if that black wire is supposed to be a ground. It's unusual that they would use red wires for ground and black wires for power, but stranger things have happened. So I think this camera on this mirror works exactly the same as the backup camera, except the backup camera has a couple of extra modes that it operates in, so it changes the focal point or something. What other wires were there? Well, I wonder if we have a bad ground on that. But it goes back to the control unit for the ground. It's not a dedicated ground. So here's my thought process on this thing after all this time. Both the right camera for right lane departure or side view and the rear view camera seem to operate very similarly. The troubleshooting information the limited troubleshooting information that's available from Honda says that this red wire is supposed to be the camera ground. It just goes back to the audio control unit. As I said before, I've qualified all of these wires. They're all good. So I thought I'd compare the right mirror, or the right camera on the right side passenger mirror. This red wire has the same voltage on it as the red wire over here. It's not 0 like it says in that. All the rest of the circuits test the same. So I'm leaning towards the fact that the troubleshooting information is incorrect. Imagine that. There is no other troubleshooting chart. It says built-in diagnostics in the radio and qualifying wires is basically it. And then if that doesn't work, change the camera. If that doesn't work, change the audio control head. So I'm going to try and source a previously enjoyed rear view camera. See if anybody at the wrecking yards has one, because that's easy enough to just plug in and try. I would have already tried that, but given the current COVID situation, most of the recycling yards are on lockdown. So we'll see what happens in the future. I'm going to try and find one of these cameras. I'm also going to see if I have a customer with a similar vehicle, because it's only going to take a couple minutes to compare a known good vehicle to this one if I could find another vehicle like this. So that's it for now. Sorry, I wish I had a more positive ending to this. Maybe there'll be a part 2. So we're back working on this 2014 Honda Accord sedan with the backup camera problem. Customer has ordered a new backup camera from Dorman. That's the part number, 590-440. And we're going to put it in this morning, and hopefully it's going to fix the problem. There was some controversy about the factory test procedures being very vague, so let's hope this fixes it. So remove all the plastic push pins that hold the inner trunk lid cover on to access the connector up here. Here's the connector and the wiring harness running through to the camera itself. This is the camera. So we'll get that unplugged and plug in the new part. So I've got the new camera just plugged in. I haven't mounted it yet, and I've got the vehicle running. So the moment of truth, we put it in reverse. And we have a picture from the camera. It's a beautiful thing. So now all we got to do is mount it. So as I said, I just plugged the camera in. As you can see here, it's not mounted properly. But the way this thing mounts in there is there's a little retaining clip on the passenger side, right-hand side of the camera that has to be depressed, and the camera will just pop in like this and snap in place. So let's go ahead and install it in its location. So to remove this camera that's in here, it's necessary to remove this chrome strip. So over on this side, through the back of the trunk, is a 6mm bolt with a 10mm head. One here and one here. Simply up through this hole here, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it there, you can see that 6mm, 10mm headed bolt. remove those 2 bolts. Now, problem. The bolts are turning, the nut in the chrome is broken loose, and I can't get either of those 2 bolts out. They're probably rusted from the backside, and so the clip is turning in the plastic trim, and those bolts need to be removed to get it out. So I'm going to try and, I don't know, pry out on it as I thread it. I might have to drill the end of the bolt off to get that trim off. That trim has to come off in order to get this camera out. A 5-minute job turned ugly. So there's what I had to do. I had to drill the head of the bolt off from the bottom using a 1/8 drill bit and then a 5/16 drill bit. And I got the other side to do now, but I got this side, the left side, drilled out. Hopefully we can repair the mount once we get the trim off. So there's the plastic nut spinning free inside the plastic. There's clips here that hold it on, but those bolts need to be removed first in order to pry this thing out. Now we got the trim off, now we can take the camera out. So here's what I did. I took the plastic nuts. You can see why they broke. They're all rusted from the backside, so as soon as you start to turn the bolt, the whole plastic piece just turns inside the plastic trim. So I've taken them right out because I can't put anything in there, it's broken. And I've glued in a piece of plastic on either end with that rapid fix or instant fix. There's a 2-part liquid and filler. And what I'm going to do is snap the trim back into place and then drill up through it and put a self-tapping screw, just a small sheet metal screw, because it doesn't really need to do much, because these clips here will hold it in place, these 2 and these clips here. So that should be good to go. We'll see. So I set it in place and marked it, and this is what I'm going to use to hold it in from the bottom. These pan head screws will thread into the plastic that I've drilled here, and they'll likely come out if I ever have to come out again. So there's the screws back installed. I don't know if you can see it from that angle, but they threaded in there nice and tight. So I'm sure it won't come off. Just clean up the filings here and we're good to go. So let's back this thing out of the shop. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. After all that inaccurate service diagnostic information. Well, camera seems to work just fine. Let's not back into anything. Thanks for watching.